I think that oftentimes we as a society tend to blame a lot of our problems and direct a lot of our anger towards a specific political figurehead that to us represents a lot of the problems in today's society. When in fact, a lot of the problems we face are occurring at smaller scale levels. And if we as individuals and as a community could get together and do something about them in a more collaborative manner, perhaps we could at least alleviate some of the suffering caused by our current administration. I'll use this as an example. In one of my previous videos, I talked about how Donald Trump was not doing enough to make housing more affordable. In reality, the federal government and governing bodies and structures in general can only do so much involving our housing. They can pass certain laws to try and protect the populace from, I don't know, scamming real estate agents and contractors, or make laws to help them out with their mortgages and make sure that paying for their housing doesn't get out of hand, or even laws on, work with governors of various states to determine, how expensive should housing be relative to what the populace is earning and or the population's income, and should we put a cap on that, and how much of a cap should we put on that? Everything else really has to do with, again, more on the state level, the local level, the contractors, the real estate agents. And if there are some agents and businessmen that can find loopholes, even around some of the well-meaning laws, to scam their clients like some sort of mafia, well, unfortunately, that is not completely Donald Trump's fault. So, that being said, I really wanted to start my first mini segment on society and fascism and how we all play into those dynamics. Alrighty, let's get started. By the way, I do want to make a better future video going into the specifics of stuff like the housing crisis, job crisis, referring back to all the stuff that happened back in 2008 and everything. I was honestly, one, a bit too young to completely remember all of that. Two, I was still about 2 to 3 years new to this country. And three, me and my family, thankfully did not experience the brunt end of that. Though, we were just struggling with being new to this country and settling. So that was a struggle of its own, but we were not actually directly affected by the economic crisis during that time, fortunately. But me being a Gen Zer who is living in these times of uncertainty and sociopolitical and economic upheaval in our country, now I am really starting to face some of the brunt end of it, and it's man, it is not fun. Anyway, let's get back to our original topic at hand. It's only after going through certain experiences that I realize that I simply cannot comprehend the concept of cruelty, no matter how hard I try, because it's so dumb. Sometimes I wonder if it isn't the cruelty of people and the strange illogical games they play, because in their minds they're superior for whatever arbitrary reasons. that plays a big role in driving some others into insanity and or making them sick. This type of behavior is not cute or quirky. We should not be nice around people like this. We should draw a line with them where possible without getting ourselves into too much trouble. Though, if they really start invading our territory, I feel like we have no other choice but to fight back. I don't think a lot of people realize how their own cruelty or their tolerance to it, their lack of accountability, and inability to carry some of the weights and burdens that come with the human experience, and even scarier, their normalization of cruelty and lack of empathy, is only feeding the flames of fascism. No matter what their political views are, I do not at all consider this type of behavior to be something I chase after or admire. It is utter weakness spreading in our sickness like a society, spreading in our society like a sickness, and resulting in the downward spiral of society from the inside out. It's really easy for us to blame particular politicians and figureheads for all of our problems, but perhaps we, as a collective, not just as individuals, are the cause of many of our own problems as a disconnected and unawakened collective that really just seems to be going after each other and playing the blame game with each other. And those politicians are simply feeding into those uglier parts of ourselves simply for the sake of getting the vote. Fascism is not just about overt bigotry towards particular groups of people based on factors of their identity. It's also a dynamic that enables, supports, and normalizes certain forms of authority to have excessive psychological and financial and other types of control over us. It is a dynamic that over time requires us to slowly chip away at our own ideals and principles so we may possess a certain position of power or status in society. And in a society that is only getting more expensive, these positions may become heavily sought after by people who see it as their escape from being squashed or constantly dehumanized, even if it means giving up their principles. This means many positions of authority are not truly serving their purpose to the people, but rather are simply there to safeguard the status quo as things fall apart. And some of those positions are becoming increasingly corrupted. Many of these authority are unfortunately actually decent people who, like a security guard, are trying to survive the position they have been put in an increasingly tyrannical society without knowing how to carefully guide the populace to gather together and defeat the slow and steady removal of their individuality, rights, freedoms, and critical thinking. In other words, they're simply there to uphold a false guise of professionalism and morale, when in reality, not doing much to actually help the struggling and the suffering and the downtrodden. Fascist dynamics can be really contributed to by any identity group, regardless of their race, gender, political associations, etc., and it is contributed to not only by the oppressors, but also by those who allow themselves to be oppressed and insincere in order to gain a seat at the table. It is a dynamic that allows for insincere people to preach equality without practicing it, or truly treat people in their own lives with that type of uncorrupted kindness and consideration, without placing them in a designated role. True anti-fascism, in my opinion, includes a mindset and way of living that allows for the liberation and empowerment of self and others, not in a reckless way, but in a way that overall contributes positively to us as a collective in our planet. It is about truly seeing and understanding one another, and in a way that doesn't always come with an agenda or with a need to take something from another. It's like a rebel with a cause. It treats everyone with the same amount of humanity and consideration, no matter their position in society. Collaborative, symbiotic, and allowing for individuality is how I would describe a truly anti-fascist society, but we are not there yet, and perhaps our countries keep facing the same type of issues and repeating the same types of cycles, ugly revolutions, crises, and war, because we have not elevated our consciousness, educated ourselves, and evolved collectively in large enough amounts in order to be able to live like this and trust each other with this type of profound knowledge and wisdom. I do think we are getting closer to this, and more people are adapting a mindset like mine, so that gives me hope. The societal cruelty that feeds fascism is not always so obvious at first. Many times, it starts off with microaggressions or acts of condescension hidden under the mask of niceness that is rather belittling. It starts off with a lack of sense of belonging not only for factors related to our inherent identity, but also for our beliefs, our principles, and even our intellect and ability to hold a type of humanity and compassion that many people simply don't understand, but is necessary for our survival as a species. It starts off with making a person or certain group of people feel like they deserve to be isolated or exiled for whatever arbitrary reason the oppressors can pick out and find, even going out of their way to find any piece of information that fits the narrative that the victim is unsafe. It starts off with the oppressor, who can come in any form, almost infantilizing us from the get-go, but in a way that leaves us feeling vulnerable and incapable. They take even the smallest of flaws and blow it up into something much bigger, making us feel like there is no way around it. In the eyes of those people, we're already a victim of sorts pretty much from the beginning, even if they aid in causing our victimization. But to make matters worse, they don't want to do anything to help or empower us. No, they enjoy seeing us as the victim, labeling us in a manner that really ruins our reputation and isolates us, as it is their sadistic pleasure. Any little supposed help they give comes with a hidden agenda to take away our rights and autonomy, and therefore disempower and trap us or enslave us. They will take every little flaw and assumption based on what little they truly know about our background and paint a picture of us that makes us seem unsavable and untouchable, when in reality that is not the case. They look at us through a pitiful scorn, knowing full well the pleasure they are deriving from our suffering. For now, it may just be a toxic relationship or a few incidents of bullying, but this is the same type of personality and behavior that allowed such heinous acts as those carried out in concentration camps to occur. For in the eyes of our oppressors, we were never well. We were always a defect, always sick, ungodly, and always unsavable, even when we were doing relatively well, and we should not underestimate the lengths the oppressors will go in order to try and create such conditions that we actually become that. We were something they wanted control over, so they had to victimize us in some way in order for that to occur, or else label us as something that needed control for others' safety, or even our own safety. Viewing certain groups of people, or the more vulnerable people, as some type of repulsive insect shunned by God who deserves to be institutionalized for their uniqueness, and painting them out to be as such is a hallmark of fascist culture. Somehow, in their eyes, we paradoxically become both victimized but also a criminal for being a victim in the first place, or speaking out of turn to our oppressors. For they fear we may never recover from the damage they caused us, and therefore now we are a burden, or they fear our anger, potential for vengeance even if we don't seek it out, and a rebelliousness that allows us our sovereignty, despite our oppressors' attempts to squash us. Truly sadistic individuals are actually few. However, the way their sickness can spread is exponential. The worst part about cruelty and callousness is that many who participate in it are not even aware that they are participating in these dynamics. Anybody proxy to sadistic individuals who mask themselves under a guise of niceness and righteousness, or else charm and humor, even if people know that they are a sadistic individual. Especially if those surrounding them are lacking in their own form of emotional maturity and intelligence in some way, can use instances like these to leverage the damage such individuals are causing to their own advantage, despite knowing the harm they are causing to the victims, or else do this for their own entertainment, for their own gain and promotion, to satisfy their own hungry and repressed shadow that so fervently wants to join in on the cruelty, and even pass the victim up in other instances. Some of those people may even make the victim feel like they deserved such treatment and find any reason to do so, or otherwise villainize the victim in some form or fashion, often using their difficult circumstances, traumas, and even ailments to make them seem incapable, exaggerate their condition, and even label them unsafe instead of actually truly helping them up. In other instances, the oppressors may be so narrow-minded that to them, the worldview of the people they're trying to oppress is simply too much to handle, is unnecessary, and the truth they speak must have a lid put over. I'll end with some words. The way in which many everyday Americans contribute to an increasingly tyrannical society is by creating conditions such that it's too dangerous to care about anyone or anything without being perceived as troublesome, crazy, or naive enough to be used and abused. The people who enjoy playing mind games and participating in cruelty should realize how critical it is that they get over their big egos, or otherwise they're not much better than the very culprits supporting outright fascist politicians and carrying tiki torches, even if they don't realize this fact. In fact, I would say that even the decent people defending the status quo are not much better than the fascists either. I'm not even exaggerating anymore. Take this as a necessary warning. It doesn't matter what position people who participate or even unintentionally uphold cruelty and indifference claim to hold, even if it's one in which they're helping others. Many people like that don't even realize how being part of such dynamics is leaking into all aspects of their lives, including their ability to truly care about those different from them and the oppressed and the helpless. Everyone participates in friendly banter and gossip, as that is a human thing to do. However, when does it cross a threshold in which it absolutely tarnishes the target's or victim's name, leaving them with corrupt authority hanging over their head, ready to take away their autonomy and livelihood at any point, for no other fact than they were an innocent person put in a terrible position, and now that person is simply reacting to their circumstances. Many of the people who are sadistic and carry out cruelty are internally broken and not well themselves. However, we know by now in our society who receives more compassion and leeway for their vices, crimes, cruelty, and illnesses, and how the victims of such people, ironically enough, suffer the brunt end of neglect and maltreatment from not just those people, but from our systems themselves. Yet somehow, even in the midst of our own suffering and neglect, we are expected to be top quality towards our oppressors and give them our blood, sweat, and tears, knowing full well they may be some of the very same people capable of carrying out the most appalling hate crimes against us, our loved ones, and our progeny in the next decade or two, or if not carry it out, quietly support such dynamics and watch it happen without doing anything as they hide away in cowardice. If anything screams inequality, it is scenarios like this. Defeating fascism, or at least dealing with it and the grief it causes, requires us to get in touch with the part of us that defies logic, all labels, and even diagnosis. Sometimes it requires us to simply hold a hand out for the suffering and neglected. It requires us to be compassionate and gentle, with offering warmth and love through our words and actions, even if it's temporary. Sometimes people need an escape route and a safe place to stay, and it requires us to be the safe space sometimes. It requires us to get in touch with our rage, should we need to form a resistance and fight back and defend ourselves.